What's that?
There's a lot of you know, I could go, you know, running the base was a great
Oh,
experience, you know,
absolutely.
helping to build the Afghan army, going to visit them, calling all the troops out to find out if they were really multi-ethnic, diverse force, and finding out by asking them directly they weren't, and the general was panicking that I was going to go back and tell Rumsfeld. You know, I go on and on, but the bottom line is the worst experience was after I got out of war college. They sent me to Joint Staff, and you know, they wanted me to build the Afghan National Army, and I was an Air Force guy. I didn't even know what a battalion was.
Well,
All
and you're a
right,
weather
so
guy. You're not
I was a
only
weather.
you're not only an Air Force guy, you are a weather guy.
Right, now the good thing about weather is that weather people need to understand every weapon system in the Air Force and in the Army. Because, by the way, you don't know this, but Air Force weather supports the Army also. So we, you know, the one good thing is that, and they didn't tell me that. That was the other thing they didn't tell me when I joined, right? They didn't say, I didn't, you know, I even told them I didn't join the Army. I joined the Air Force. Well, that's too bad. You might get an Army assignment. But the bottom line is that you know, the one advantage I had is I understand all the weapon systems, right? Because weather impacts every weapon system, which is what we're applying now to TruWeather, right? We understand how everything's affected by weather because it's mission critical, and we have to try to optimize the use of all our military assets and force. But when I got there, you know, there was a lot of newness, right?
Yeah.
In this whole environment of military strategy. I got a good training at school, good education, but I had to learn what the Army vernacular was, and I had to do it credibly as a lieutenant colonel. And what happened was General North, who's another one of my heroes, because he believed in me. He was the CENTAF commander and later became the PACAF 4-star. He picked me to come over, and he actually gave me, and I know people aren't going to understand this, but he actually got me promoted below the zone because he took one of his coveted early promotion recommendations and gave it to me when I came to Joint Staff, even though I had only just joined, and he took it away from fighter pilots, all right,
Wow.
to give to me. So already I was not well liked on the Joint Staff because I even had a fighter pilot come up to me and go, "What are you doing here? Why are you taking our promotions?" I said, "Well, what are you doing here? You're just the technician that flies an aircraft. Anybody can learn how to do technical work. What do you know about military strategy and policy?" I mean, that was my New York coming out of me. But the bottom line is that I really was starting to have that imposter syndrome. And it got really, really bad for a while because I really was struggling. I had to work a lot of hours. There was a lot of classified stuff I couldn't take home. So I couldn't really, work at home and get caught up. And it took me about 6 months to get out of that muck. And finally, it all just went boom. And that's where I turned gray mostly.
Wow.
And after that, once I figured it out, then all of a sudden it was Katie barred the door, right? But that was the worst experience in my Air Force career. And it really challenged me. And again, I think learning how to work through that and being resilient and not giving up and believing that you could do it, even when you believe you can't do it, that's what's really built me to run this company. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in building a company, right? And you don't have money coming in like you did in the government. So, you have to believe in what you're doing because it's so easy to give up and run out of money. And so I think all those experiences have really prepared me for this.
Well, and I think, it all comes down to what your theme is, your passion, right? So
Right.
Let's talk about TruWeather Solutions, because when you were in the Air Force, whether working for the Joint Staff or, as a commander out there at Manas, you did some groundbreaking work. And then, let's not forget everybody, by the way, because I know Don pretty well. He became not only a colonel in the Air Force, but then had a follow-on career in the National Weather Service, one of those 4 paths you can go to as a weather person, where he was in the Senior Executive Service, SES. For those that don't know what that is, it's kind of the equivalent of a general officer or a flag officer in the military. So very high-powered civilian exclusive position that you held there in the National Weather Service for a number of years. You saw so many things, and all of this informed your thought process on why TruWeather Solutions needed to exist. So tell us that kind of value proposition, why you created the company, and then I want to get into some of your tips to new entrepreneurs because, like I said, Don, we're going to run out of time, and we are. So tell us a little bit about that. Your value proposition, the origin story, if you will, for TruWeather, and then I want to get into some tips. And while we're doing this, if we could please roll that picture of Don at the UAS Summit and Expo. It's a more recent picture, but go ahead, Don. Tell us the origin story.
So when I in the military, I did some work on Tanker Air Control Center. We actually won the Air Force Team Chief of Staff Team Excellence Award for Air Mobility Command, and were nominated at the headquarters level because we figured out that whether we were dropping good missions on the floor, most of the decision makers were not using weather properly, and we came up with a method to try to get them to focus more on how to use the weather properly and making go, no-go decisions. So we were flying 100,000 airlift missions a year and averaging 5,000 weather delays a year. Wow. And in 1 year, using the framework that I developed around risk management and better integration and decision support, working specifically with the end user, we cut that to 1,800, and we saved the Air Force $200 million, and we proved that 40 or 50% at that point of all weather delays were unnecessary. And that really gets back to our economy. You know, $634 billion is the cost of weather on the U.S. economy, and I know 30% that's recoverable today. But, you know, the problem is getting people to see and use the data in the proper way. So that was the first element of TruWeather, was how do we take the data we have and get folks to use it properly to recover that loss of cost that they are experiencing. I left the military, went to the Weather Service, and started seeing all the science and technology that was on the shelf. And, you know, I had a $130 million budget. I deployed the upgrade to all the national weather radars for dual polarization, which allows us now to see tornadoes on the ground and the size of hail and all that. And I learned that the government was becoming a choke point in getting technology out. Now, this is not a revelation. You know, everybody knows that. But the thing is I decided to do something about it, right? Which is a little different. You know, once I learned all the science and technology trapped in universities, and once I realized that one of the biggest shortfalls we have is collecting low altitude observations, and this was before I knew we were going to do drones and air taxis, but I knew that there was a book that came out, a study came out in 2009 saying weather and climate from the ground up. And they basically said that you had to collect 400 profiles of the atmosphere below 5,000 feet in order to really solve the microweather problem. And we can never get there. The government was cutting ground-based observing, and I realized at that point that this was not the path. And then it came down to one day sitting in a room with senior leaders above me in NOAA with some outside people coming in and me recognizing they listened to them more than they listened to me internally. So I said, okay, the way to solve this problem is to get outside and put pressure back on the system. So that's what I did. So I left. And it's been 12 years almost in the making, 10 years. And where we are right now is over the last 10 years, I developed a company. I've influenced the new standards for weather through ASTM. The FAA is buying into it. We're moving from a data certifying weather instruments to data performance standard. People told me I was crazy, that I'd never be able to influence that. We now getting a worldwide audience on this. I'm going to Israel next week because I was invited by the Civil Aviation Authority based on the standard. And then we're building our platform and our Fusion platform that can turn lots of weather information into simple decisions, which we already have as a SaaS platform. And we have lots of customers. And now we're embarking on thinking about how to roll out a national network of sensors that are not ground-based. Keep in mind, the ground is not the problem. It's what's happening above the ground. Only 3% of the country, we know what the ceiling height really is and the visibility. And that's because we measure it at airports. And we only have 3% of the the atmosphere below 5,000 feet where we actually measure winds every day. And that's just aircraft landing at airports. We estimate most everything that goes on in the lower atmosphere. We have better measurements above that because satellites do a good job of seeing the weather and getting that in our models. That's why our forecast skill has improved so much globally. But the micro weather, we keep trying to do machine learning and all these techniques, but it's like trying to get blood out of a stone. It's just not the answer. So the answer is getting better data. And that's what we're focusing on right now in our next part of our journey.